sorry, that's all I know how to play. 3 teachers in 3 years when I was a young boy, and they all shockingly retired after teaching me at least that song. I am playing from not a hymnal, but I am looking at the Bible as I think about the history of song in our faith. The very first song in all the Bible is from Moses in Exodus 15, the song of Moses that comes after the Hebrews were led through the Red Sea onto dry land while Pharaoh and his army fell into it. A great song of God's act of salvation, of God's victory. And then from there on out, songs were sung at great moments of God's intervention. You can think about the song of Hannah. You think about the song of Mary. In Luke's gospel, everyone is singing. Mary's singing, everyone is singing, because that is what we do when we have great moments of joy, but also it's what we do when we have great moments of sorrow. Think about your favorite songs that you play again and again and again, and think about what they can do for you. I was walking on the Greenway a couple of weeks ago, and I for some reason came to mind a country music singer that was popular in the mid-90s, and I downloaded his album onto my phone and was walking down the Greenway, and I was listening to a song that I literally had not heard since probably the 11th grade. And I had this great, it was shocking to me, this great feeling of teenage angst come over me, like a lovesick puppy, the way I was in the 11th grade. And it was all because of that song playing in my earphones. The connection of that sound to my memory and my being was so very important. I know that you have, because we all do, we have songs that bring us back to a place, to certain feelings, certain emotions. And when we are in a mood, we go to those songs to give word and melody to what we are feeling. The same is true with our faith. What would Christmas be like without fa la 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 to bring home the great feeling of the celebration of Christ's birth? We put it in song. We chant at St. Timothy's, and we chant in the liturgy, and that's something that in this modern time may be different for a lot of people. And I want to talk just for a moment about why we sing, first of all, but then talk about some specifics about chanting. When someone's having a birthday and everyone gathers around the cake and they're celebrating another year around the sun, no one says, let's all in unison say, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you. Nobody would do that. We sing it. When we have great moments of national unity or at a sporting event, we don't all stand up and put our hand over our heart and say, oh, say, can you see? No, we sing it. In great moments of unity and great moments of passing of time, of great moments of life, we mark them with song, because song is elevated speech. There are 2 ways to elevate speech. One is to whisper some of the great secrets and the great words that we say to someone, to pour out our heart. We whisper it, we lower it down, or we elevate it by singing it, by chanting it. So there's a way of taking ordinary speech and sanctifying it and putting it in an ecclesiastical mode. One of the things that I think is so very important about what we do here, which is nothing unique to us, we're just continuing old traditions, is that the sights and the smells and the sounds and the tastes and the feels are all connected to the experience of worship. For the most part, the only time you'll ever smell incense is during the liturgy. The only time you'll ever hear the kind of chant that we do is at church. The sights, like our capital campaign, and the color, and the icons, and the glass, and all of that, those things are only associated with church. So then, this is what happens. It's like me walking on the Greenway. When I'm walking and I hear that song, I am immediately transported back to 1995. And all the feelings for a moment came over me. When we come to church, if our mind is not into it, if our heart's not into it, if our soul isn't into it, our body can hold that place through the senses, through the sights and the smells and the sounds and the touches that can hold the place until our mind and our heart and our soul is ready to join in. So I think those elements are so very important. And while the temptation may be among churches to make it exactly like everyday life, I think the real power and the transformative experience of it is to do the opposite. This is nothing like ordinary life. This is nothing like a concert. It's nothing like any other secular gathering, because it's not. So chant is different. And the hymns that we do are different. I know that when we're driving in the car, we don't typically put on old hymns, and we like to hear different kinds of music. But there's something about a hymn that carries us through the passages of time in life that is undeniable. And hymns have a sound, they have a poetry all of their own. Here's something else about chanting that is important. I mean, there's some practical reasons why we chant. For instance, in doing these videos, I've always done the sung Mass for a couple of practical reasons, but one of them is that if I'm saying, "The Lord be with you," and someone off camera says, "and also with you," or "with thy spirit," it's very difficult to hear. But if I go, "The Lord be with you," and someone says, "and with thy spirit," it picks up better, we can hear it. That's not only true in 2020 during Corona time when we're having to communicate via screens, but imagine being in a cavernous church. Imagine being in a smaller space, maybe where the acoustics aren't so great. How do you hear the liturgy? How do you proclaim the good news? Chant cuts through the acoustical challenges of space, and you can hear it better. There are two ways of being heard in a large space. You can shout, which is unpleasant to hear, but also not very effective. Or you can chant, and it carries it across the room, and it has that real practical advantage of that way. The other really important thing that most people don't realize is that if I'm reading, for instance, the gospel, even if I'm not meaning to, I can use the instrument of my voice to inflect certain words or to put the emphasis on certain phrases, and I can make you hear exactly what I want you to hear, just on the emphasis that I put on certain words. But when you chant the gospel, you're following a form, you're following a mode, and it takes my bias out of the text. So that what you're hearing is you're hearing the pure words being delivered through the medium of chant, which is better for you and it's better for me. So you can hear it more clearly in a time before, microphones and acoustical amplification. But also whatever I'm thinking about, whatever I'm wrestling about, or whatever interpretation I want you to have, it's removed. It's gone through this purifying filter so that all you hear are the words of the Gospels. And not only were the Gospels chanted, but for a long time, and even today in traditional liturgies, everything's chanted. And there's a way of chanting the epistle, there's a way of chanting the Gospel, there's a way of chanting the Eucharistic prayer. So I would encourage you, if chant is something that you're just not into, I get it. But realize it's not simply a stylistic approach. There's a theological importance that undergirds why we do it. There's practical reasons, but also there are theological reasons. And then there's something about elevating our speech, elevating our practice, lifting up our hearts, as we say in the Eucharistic prayer. Not just our hearts, but our bodies and our voices. Because when we come together for the Holy Eucharist, we're coming to the place where heaven and earth come together. And we don't want to approach that like we would approaching the barista at Starbucks. It's not the same thing.